Hi, everyone. I'd like to introduce Mike Hudson from ISD. He's going to talk about the Central Region Roadmap. Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, Mike, thanks. Good morning, everybody. Pleasure to be here with you on a very typical spring morning here in Central Region. I think everything under the sun is going on today, weather, water, and fire-wise. But I do appreciate being able to spend a few minutes with you this morning to talk about the latest release of the Central Region Roadmap. Those of you that have been around for a while know that we have been doing roadmaps now since roughly 2017. It's something that Chris Strager and I kind of brought with us when we worked up at the headquarters and worked on the initial big roadmap for the agency in around the 2010-2011 timeframe. It was, we thought, a really interesting exercise to try to focus, if you will, what we really want to do over the next several years, what really kind of drives the majority of activities, goals, deliverables, almost, if you will, like a sandbox of kind of where we wanted to kind of focus everybody's attention on. Not saying that other things outside the construct of a roadmap aren't important, but kind of like what Ken Graham is doing right now, and I'm sure many of you have seen this slide, this information. But even at the headquarters level, Ken Graham is really trying to focus folks on what we really need to make sure we get done. Sometimes we can get so busy doing things that we have trouble getting things done, if that makes sense. I'm sure you've heard at times the expression, a mile wide and an inch deep when it comes to like describing a river. Well, kind of a similar thing. You can be doing lots of things and not necessarily making progress on certain things you want to make sure you get done. And in the case of what Director Graham has put forward for the agency, these 10 things are things that he believes will really help to start the transformation of the agency into the future. And some of it is taking care of some crises we know we have in the short term. So when we formulated this year's roadmap, we kind of stepped back and thought about the efforts we'd done in the past and where we wanted to direct our thoughts into the future. Because in the past, we developed some strategic outcomes that we wanted to get to, things that revolved around our forecast production, decision support, infusion of science into service. But then we listed very specific goals that we wanted to work on region-wide. So we're going to do X, and by doing X, we're going to get closer towards that strategic outcome. One thing that I think we collectively felt when we put together this year's roadmap was that was an approach in the past that, while it may have served us well, was not the most inclusive type of approach, where it was hard for folks to find their spot in the roadmap. That was one thing I heard from the last two or three that we produced was, it's really tough for me, Mike, to see where I fit in, where my office fits in, where our projects fit in. And in looking at the things that Ken has lined out, a lot of this really drives organic involvement. You see something that you're working on the national level, how can we bring that to the very local level, to a local office, to a midnight shift, to a group of folks? So we made a couple of conscious decisions here with the new roadmap and putting this together and collecting feedback from the MICs and the HICs at their meeting last summer in Kansas City, collecting stuff across the various sub-communities that we have, both management and non-management, in the case of like the IDSS team and some of our other regionally chartered teams. We really tried to listen to what cadence would really help us as we kind of come out of COVID, we start getting back to a new normal, but with burnout in mind as a concern. How can we refocus our efforts? And so we decided in the next roadmap that we're going to kind of evolve this into what becomes more of a living document. We've had these prescriptive roadmaps that go over 2 or 3 years. When they're done, we produce a new one. The new one tries to tie back to the old one, but perhaps the better approach is to think of this year to year. What are we doing? So at least every 2 years, we're going to try to get in and update a lot of what we've put together, but maybe even more frequently, right, as we get some progress on key areas. One big change to this roadmap, if you've had the chance to read it, and I hope you have, it's up on the Central Region Google site. It is also, we sent it out as an all-hands email here a few weeks ago. The roadmap doesn't actually list a single specific thing we're going to do. That's very different than what we've had in the past. And especially the last roadmap, it was very prescriptive. We're going to do these so many things. We're not going to have that now. We're going to let everyone drive that. We're going to let you drive that. Coming up with the construct of objectives and key results. Now, the roadmap online has a long section that explains the logic behind what OKRs are and what they mean. But really what it is we set ourselves mileposts, if you will, which really ties it to the term roadmap, right? We know we want to get from Kansas City to Chicago, but we don't tell you how. We just say we want to get to Chicago and we want to get there in the next 8 hours. And then the key results are things that fill in from folks along the path between here and Chicago. How we're going to get there. We're going to turn east on 36. We're going to get to Hannibal and turn north along the Chicago Kansas City connector, kind of borrowing a little bit of roadmappish type things. But the bottom line is that it's not a descriptive document anymore. Or I'm sorry, not a prescriptive document. It's a descriptive one. It helps show what we want to accomplish and then try to let everyone see their path and their way as to helping to contribute it. So when you look at in the document, there's a page that has this very graphic in it. The objectives are really broad. Where do I need to go? And kind of like the Ken's 10, if you will. They are more or less, where do we need to go? We know we need to be looking at something like IT architecture and IT governance as one of the longer term ones in Ken's list for the agency. But it doesn't tell you how, right? It doesn't tell you that that's step by step and then we know we're done. It's a very broad description of where we need to go. The key results are how do we know we're getting there? The projects that start to come along and fill that in. But those projects are driven by specific initiatives that are undertaken by all of us at every level of the organization. They could be thought of as activities or projects or goals. We tend to think of annual operating plans, right, and goals that we set. Those are the things we do that help to drive key results, and key results in turn help us reach to objectives. And the objectives are meant to inspire and set direction. They're not meant to be something that you can simply lay out in a document and say, well, we know we're here. It's kind of one of those things that you know you're there when you feel that you know you're there. And it's going to be a little different construct for us to kind of look at as we move along with this. And I'm very excited to take the journey along with all of you, as I know Ken, Sally, Scott, and the other division chiefs here are as well. This is going to be something that's going to be very organic if we get it teed up the way we hope it will be, and that everyone can see a thing, I could do this, and it will help us to achieve some of the key results. So I just want to dive right in and talk about our 5 objectives and maybe share a little bit of the key results with all of you this morning to maybe start getting those creative juices flowing as to how do I fit in? How does my office fit in? How does my work group fit in to the Central Region Roadmap? So the very first objective in the roadmap is all about mutual aid. Mutual aid and embracing it as a process to maximize capacity for all of our offices, to help the offices to prioritize hyper-local needs. It's a very bureaucratic sounding objective, right? But at the core of it, what really boils down to is how can we help each other to meet the goals that we know we have in our communities, in our neighborhoods. There is so much work to do at the local office level, from decision support to messaging to working with the underserved and unrepresented communities. The palette is very, very broad, and every office has this work to do. Some of them may be a little bit more than others, given population or maybe given weather, climate, water sensitivities that they have in their areas. But as an example, just last night, we had an unexpected communications outage at Omaha, where other offices jumped in and helped out, right, in the middle of some severe weather. We hadn't anticipated that would happen, but sometimes things happen. In other instances, we kind of know things are coming. As an example, the background of this is the Chicago skyline. The city of Chicago offers so many opportunities in the summertime months, especially for large crowds, large venues, lots of people at risk to potential weather hazards, that the WFO, has a lot to do, right, in balancing out the important work that needs to be done for decision support, as well as taking care of business in their other areas. So when we formulated the key results, a few of these may be more driven by Central Region headquarters, but others aren't. Kelly is working very hard, Kelly Allen, our Deputy ISD Chief, to update our service backup supplement. It's something we needed to get done for some time, but even within that construct, we're going to try to start teeing up a different way of thinking about backup versus mutual aid. We tend to think of backup like we did last night. Omaha went down unexpectedly. Offices came in and provided that service backup right on the fly because we had to keep the office mission going. But what if we think of using backup like constructs or other types of things that we can do, like the remote mesoscale analysis stuff that we're spinning up this afternoon, or Savvy or Moz, or any of those other types of mutual aid constructs, to think about how we can help each other out when an office is super busy. And the story I'd like to tell on this actually stems from some work that I did on the Hurricane Ida service assessment when we were down interviewing the staff at the Slidell office. You know, a group of people there were insanely busy for a 48-hour period while Hurricane Ida came on shore back in the late summer of 2021. And I think most all of you that are on this call can probably think about what you were doing if you were on shift that evening when the hurricane was coming. You were watching it. You were looking at the data. You were, going, wow, that's interesting. Wow, that's impressive. We could have maybe taken a little different construct of doing more to help out. Maybe some of the things that were still important to do, right, that we needed to do in the Slidell service area, but that they needed time to do other things, like get folks out to some of the EOCs, or do more work on social media with messaging to try to reach the vulnerable and underserved populations. So the notion here with the backup supplement is that we're going to try to give everyone a slightly different mindset towards this, mindset versus behavior, right? Instead of having primary and secondary and tertiary, or some hierarchical means of backing each other up, how about we think of it more as a cadre of offices that can help us at any time if we ask, and that we might be able to apply these situations in some of our higher impact events to help with our staffing, to help our staffing focus on the things that are the most important, hyper local, right? Decision support, messaging. You're the trusted folks in your community. And so I think there's a lot of work here that the different offices, that the sub-communities could start thinking about. And that's really the key to this roadmap. It's a thinking exercise as much as it is a doing exercise. How can we think about things a little differently? And maybe we can try some things. Maybe they work out so well the first time, maybe they need a couple of iterations to get perfect. But a lot of what goes into Objective 1, I think, has a lot of ripe opportunity for all of you out there to think about how you might build this into things like your severe weather, flood, winter weather operations plans, and how mutual aid might become ways that you could help extend your capabilities to do the things that are most important to your customers in your very local area. And it's more than just weather, water, and climate operations, right? How about administrative, IT, and maintenance functions across our electronics shops, our ITOs, our ASAs, our OPLs? All of us have things that exist on the fringes of our CWAs, right? Some of them, and some of our larger CWAs are 3-4 hours away. They're a whole day to go take care of something. Well, if it's a big weather day expected in the office and you kind of want to make sure you've got folks there to keep things running, like the radar, like AWIPs, like other things, perhaps it's an opportunity for some of your colleagues in a nearby office that are about the same distance away to help you out on that particular day, to be able to maybe take care of a priority one on an ASOS site and get that thing up and running before the weather gets there. But you can use those folks, more locally to take care of higher priority things. I think it's a mindset change more than anything, Objective 1. And I'm very excited to see what offices, what you all brainstorm, consider, and come up with, working locally, working with your lots, working, as teams to try to figure out some of the things you might do. And at the end, I'm going to talk about how to share some of these ideas. And I think having our service backup supplement is going to get us back to 3 offices. I think some things have changed software-wise, IT-wise, and AWIPs that we can really kind of get a group of folks that are more prepared than others. I mean, ideally, anyone should be able to help anybody out at any time, but I think we all know from experience having things configured, having things tested, making sure they work is a pretty critical part, making sure mutual aid actually works when we're ready. The second objective and the third objective we actually co-wrote with Southern Region. Over the years, we've heard feedback from all of you here at Central Region headquarters. Why can't we work better with the other regions? Why can't we do things more consistently with the other regions so that we don't have to be different than them? And especially if you're an office like Jackson, Kentucky, that butts up against Eastern and Southern Region, well, suddenly you're trying to balance multiple regions, right? Well, objective 2 and 3 are shared specifically word for word with Southern Region. This one focuses on interpreting and communicating risk-based and probabilistic information. We've dove into this in the past, and we've talked about this, especially in the last roadmap, of starting to build some capacity. But it is a very big and growing area in improving our science and service delivery. So this one may be focused a little bit more towards operations than some of the other objectives. But the key results you see on the screen here, we've worked for years as a region towards a modernized forecast process. We've had wonderful deliverables that have come from our grid methodology teams, from our sub-communities of SUs that have been working out there. We've tested different methods, right, to look at science for doing winter weather, snow and ice, and those things. And the service of the sciences chiefs rather have worked on sort of a policy paper or a guidance paper, if you will, towards a modernized forecast process. That's more of an aspirational objective and key result than anything else. It's an evolutionary step, right? But I'm sure these discussions occur on your evenings and your midnights, your quiet weekends. You know, what can we do to maybe make things work a little better, build science, and how do we build the visualizations that we're getting from DESI and from Weatherbell and other things into how we produce our messaging, our information. So there's a lot of really, I think, good opportunities here to focus and to think about how we might continue to evolve this collectively. Climate ready nation, it's a big thing. What is it? I wish I could give you that answer here on this webinar today. We're still figuring that out, I think, even at the NOAA level, but I can tell you that in the current administration, in the NOAA and DOC strategic plans, climate ready nation is a big piece of things. And I think it really ties in a lot with our work with underserved and vulnerable communities, building coalitions, understanding what impacts different groups in our CWAs. I think there's a wonderful opportunity here for OPALs, for climate focal points, for service hydrologists, as well as WCMs and everyone else for that matter, but especially those three groups to be out there listening and learning about the impacts of longer term things, drought, excessive rainfall, temperature change, and the effects that that has on communities and community resilience. In fact, the NOAA Central Region team, all of the NOAA regional collaboration teams have some efforts going into climate ready at this time, and I can really see that folding in with a lot of you out there in getting out in the community and really building some capacity. The words of estimated probability, that sounds like a big buzzy term, and or WEPS for short. Some of you may have heard of that work and some research done by Dr. Joe Ripberger at the University of Oklahoma and a number of other leading social science researchers here over the last 3 to 4 years. In fact, it was a grant NOAA paid for. How we say things, and this is something that actually came from my work on the IDA service assessment. How we say things is as important as what we say. Being able to communicate certainty as much as uncertainty in how we get messaging out to our decision makers, our core partners, to help them interpret the vast amount of information we have. I think there's some really good opportunity there from some of our sub-communities in particular to engage on just exactly what we do. Maybe even our DSS team. We focused a lot here in building tools like the DSS Builder, but maybe now a focus can shift as a collective discussion to content and how we communicate that information. And of course, the services to underserved and vulnerable communities. We're doing some work in that area. I, as your services chief, feel we're really scratching the surface. There is so much capacity there, but collectively a discussion on how we can improve those services to those particular groups and identify them with that service equity framework here recently coming out from the headquarters. Objective 3, focusing on IDSS. strengthening our ability and capacity to provide IDSS and surge capabilities. A lot of this really stems for how do we get out there and do what Ken Graham has been asking us to do, get eyeball to eyeball with our core partners, talking with them, sharing information. It's tough to get out of the office, right? We have so much going on in an office that when it comes time to consider maybe a deployment, how do we work that in? Well, mutual aid may help a little bit with that, and that kind of gets into some of the key results that we outline here. We have the deployment ready program. Many of you have participated in that, and I know in some offices there are efforts afoot to increase the number of folks that are participating in that voluntary program, taking the training, the PCUs 1 through 7, doing the deployment ready task book. Well, we've got a cadre of these folks, and we identified them. It was one of our roadmap goals from a couple of iterations ago. Well, how about we try to figure out how we use that to supplement and augment staffing? And some of that could be in person, but some of it could be virtual, right? There are capabilities we now have that we didn't have 3 or 4 years ago. Case in point, here we are all on a Google Meet today, something that we didn't do a lot of just even 3 or 4 years ago. The pandemic gave us some really good insights into how we can use technology. The Event Ready program that had been championed at first by WFO Chicago, and I know we're doing that in more offices now. How about even more? How about all of our offices? Learning how to take the good information we do produce and showing people where to find some of the basics to narrow our focus right to where we can really hone in on the important things when we do talk DSS, eyeball to eyeball. We got that common frame of reference to work from. And also looking at our capabilities of improving our IDS capability administratively or through budget and technology to build capacity. We only have so much capability to, send people place to place, do things like that. And when we take somebody out of one office, we do take capability out of that office, right, to send it to another. What technologies could help us with that? What administrative type things? The call out in the roadmap talks about, looking in each of your offices within the framework of the CBA, working this at the lot level. Are there things you could do in your offices to look at, seasonal scheduling or ideas behind scheduling that could free up folks that could focus on doing more of this face-to-face, eyeball-to-eyeball work, right? I think there's a lot of capability that you can explore there. Those are things, of course, for you MICs, HICs out there, you're working closely here with Sally, our Deputy Regional Director, on that. You're working with your stewards. There are processes to follow, but I think there's some opportunities for you all to show the way forward on this, to help figure out how you could do things. I mean, I can remember 20 years ago when I worked at a WFO, we sometimes had a shift that would be, in the evenings during the spring and summer months because we had convection, right? We didn't have that in the wintertime. Same kind of mindset, but maybe geared towards the idea of IDSS and the workload that comes along with it. So a lot of, I think, really interesting opportunity for you to focus some discussions and some, and maybe come up with some really interesting initiatives that could help advance those key results forward. Objectives 4 and 5 focus on people. And remember, in our prior roadmaps, we focused on science and service, and we focused on people and culture as some of the key tenets of things that we wanted to advance. And we tried to stick with those themes woven into how we created this latest roadmap. So retention and succession planning across all positions in Central Region. I think sometimes the mindset that comes in when you hear the word succession planning is that, well, that's management. That's management-like positions. We have to have succession planning for our MICs and our WCMs, our SUs, our ESAs, our OPALs, our service hydrologists, but it's everyone. It's our ASAs, it's our forecasters, it's our leads, it's our electronics techs and ESAs, our RMSs, FETs. I'll leave somebody out, but you get the gist of it. It's every position. Retention has become an important issue to address because one of the things we have to kind of be mindful of is that in our agency, we hired a lot of people in the late 80s and early 90s. I'm one of those people that came in at that time. And all of us are going to get close to retirement at about the same time. And we have to be mindful of the the expertise that exists in our organization, both personally and professionally. And how do we, really look at building that capacity forward? So when we look here, leaning forward into these key results, how do we expose you, as an example, talking to just one of you on the call, for what it's like to work at the next level? You may be considering it, right? You might be a forecaster who's thinking, well, I might like to be a lead forecaster here in the next 3 to 4 years, but what's it really like? What can I expect in that job? Or a lead forecaster going into a WCM or a SU position, or maybe even an MIC or the CWSUs. I think there's really good opportunity here for all of us to participate in trying to figure out how best to tackle that and how best to expose people to the opportunities before they have to, go and do it. And then hopefully don't have buyer's remorse, right? But that's always a risk when you just jump into the deep end of the pool. Let's see if we can't do that. The call out in the roadmap really talks about when we move folks into acting MIC or HIC positions, and it's something that Ken, Sally, Scott, and others here have been putting some thought to. What do we do to prepare folks for that when the day comes when they have to take on those additional responsibilities? And that's just another example from more of a management side, but I think this applies to every position that we have. Our capabilities and incentives that can be used to help foster retention. We've dabbled in this. We've done some work. There are management tools for this, but what can we think of collectively that could really help? What makes it attractive? The things that we do, we do exit interviews when people leave, but now we're doing stay interviews, right? I think that's a key thing that can contribute to a key result such as that. And then overall, what our strategy for succession planning looks like. How do we envision this office to office? Are we thinking about, in every one of our jobs, what's it going to be like for the person that maybe comes in behind me when I move on to something else, be it a promotion, another office, retirement, whatever that is? Having those strategies, and that's a very organic thing that I think grows up in every office. Objective 5, the last one, is increasing awareness of and participation in office and regional culture. We've talked about culture here for quite some time. It's been a tenet of the last 2 roadmaps in particular, and we've done some really good work in this area. We've developed our office culture teams. We have really tried to, look inside as to how our offices function, how it helps us to build healthier environments for everyone to look at. Whole region, whole office, some of those terms that we've introduced in the last couple of roadmaps. Well, in this one, we have a few things that I think really drive our key results. We're working on the organizational health blueprint, and it's something that's going on very formally, right? We're doing that in every office with a series of meetings and discussions and things. But what do we do with it once we have those meetings? How do we put that to work for us in our offices and on our shifts and in our work groups? How we recruit. We've done terrific jobs over the years of going out and trying to recruit people into the agency. Some of it has been kind of heavily focused on the meteorologists, the college road shows and things like that. But how do we broaden that to look at recruiting into all of our positions? And how do we take the existing programs we have and maybe tweak them a little, add some things to them that we really start to focus on getting into the places we want to get? And are we talking to the right groups of people? Are college students the right groups of people to be talking to? Should we be talking to folks much younger, high school, middle school, elementary? I don't know the answer to those, but I think that's an area ripe for exploration from everyone at the local office levels. And then, of course, creating greater awareness and recognition of the DEIA programs and activities that we have. We're doing a great job of getting out there and building greater awareness, but continuing to do so and celebrating diversity in our offices through the activities we do like potlucks and awareness discussions, bringing in guest speakers that help to broaden our awareness of things. Because, in our local offices, the diversity we have in the office is a direct reflection on the diversity of how we serve our customers. Being able to understand more people and understand their backgrounds, their perspectives and things. So I think there's a wealth of work that can be done at all levels here in that. So that leads me to sort of concluding my sales pitch to all of you. I wanted to share those things with you because I think it's important that we try to foster that discussion of how we develop this roadmap. We developed it not as a prescriptive list of things that we're going to do. Yes, we're going to have an annual operating plan at the regional level. Yes, we're going to probably have annual operating plans at the national level and maybe even in your local offices. But it doesn't have to be as formal as that. It can actually be something very organic. You all are going to be key to this new roadmap. Each of you, I hope, has seen in the last 15, 20 minutes of me talking that there's a role for you on the bus in this endeavor, because you all will be the ones who come up with the initiatives. You all will move these things forward to help us get towards our key results. And I hope that you think of the OKR construct and the roadmap as a whole as more or less a sandbox. I did want to speak very briefly to the idea of burnout, and that, here's this new thing, right, coming out from Central Region headquarters, bright and shiny, coming from the RD to an all hands. This is an important thing. It is. It is an important thing. But it is not meant to make everyone run 8 million directions and do, a whole bunch of new things. More than that, it's like a sandbox. We intended it to be something that we could put out there and say, there's a lot of good innovation going on, but where could we focus that time, that effort? I don't, and Ken Harding has mentioned this to me a couple of times in just, conversations we've had. It's probably not the innovation and the work that burns people out, but it's the myriad of everything going on at once, right? And not knowing exactly where we should hone in on and maybe do things. So I like to think of the OKRs and the roadmap as that sandbox. If you've got things going on locally, or maybe in your sub-communities, or maybe office to office, the roadmap gives you some ideas of where to focus those discussions. And maybe some of the things you want to do, you set aside for a little bit and concentrate on a few others to maybe help us move forward on those key results that we've got outlined in there. I do want to say, though, that if you come up with initiatives, whether they're in an office AOP, they're just projects you're working on, they're things that are going on in your sub-communities that you'd like to highlight that help achieve those results, please share them with Scott Tesmer. Scott really keeps an eye on our AOP. He keeps an eye on the goals and initiatives that we do here at CRH, but also across all of our 45 field units. We'd love to highlight those. We'd love to share those up the chain. When we talk, later this year, where are we at? Are we making some progress towards these objectives and key results? It's really great to have all of you come on and share the things you're doing. And in our management team meetings, we've kind of changed that cadence here. The MICs and WCMSUs, HICs, et cetera, the managers in your RFCs, WFOs, and CWSUs, they'll tell you that on our managers calls now we do sort of a 2 points of pride and a concern, and we round that out in the different regional sub-communities on every monthly call, because it's a chance to showcase what you're doing, to share the successes you're having, to celebrate the projects and the initiatives that you're doing, because that's where we're going to move forward on these concepts of the roadmap. It isn't going to be some top-down driven thing from Central Region headquarters or even from the national headquarters. It's going to be us, all of us working together to get this done. So I just want to close. I put a screenshot up there of the Google site that we have up there. You go to the Central Region Google site, click on the roadmap menu. The first option down there is the CR roadmap. It brings up, you can access the document. We're going to have different things. There's a whole litany of the strategic documents. If you've ever wondered what's in the new Weather Service strategic plan, or Ken's 10, or what's in the AOP for the agency, all of those links are there to give you, ideas, to give you some things to think about and chew on. That's all I have for the roadmap here. So Mike, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I did not have any questions per se that came in from the all hands email. Otherwise I'd answer them, but I'm happy to try to answer any questions anyone who's online would like to ask.
Well, great job, Mike. Great overview. If you have any questions, please raise your hand or put it into the chat box and we'll get to them.
Well, these are my favorite kind of questions, Mike. I either did a really good job or I gave you so much to think about that you're still thinking. Either way is fine. If you do come up with things after this particular science sharing webinar today, feel free to reach out to me, michael.hudson@noaa.gov. I'm more than happy to answer questions one-on-one or find me on Google Chat or whatever. Always happy to talk about big picture things and trying to move forward, but move forward in a fashion that we're not so busy doing things we're not getting anything done type of thing. This kind of topic really gets me energized, and I was really happy to be able to share the time with many of you here this morning talking about. I hope you can find some things in here that really speak to you and really help you maybe to focus some of your activities on your in your local offices, on your communities, or on your teams.
Yes, I'm not seeing anything, Mike. So thanks again. Great job. Great overview. And if you have any questions, reach out to Mike.